welcome to this deep dive. We're here to, really get into some complex ideas.
That's the plan.
And today it's something I think many find fascinating, the whole concept of the unconscious. We're going to be looking at this through the lens of analytic idealism.
Right. Using materials from a course that really examines this specific viewpoint.
Our mission, really, is to clarify what unconscious even means in this context and what that tells us about, well, reality and mind.
And it's important because for analytic idealism, the idea is that phenomenal consciousness is fundamental. It's the bedrock.
Okay, yeah.
So when you throw the word unconscious in there, it immediately sounds like a problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like something not conscious. How can that fit if everything is fundamentally conscious? That's the tension, right?
Exactly. That's the core issue we need to unpack. It seems like a direct contradiction.
So it sounds like we need to get really clear on our terms first. This feels like a language issue almost.
It often boils down to that, yes. Precision is key. So let's start with phenomenal consciousness.
Okay. What's the sort of formal definition we're working with?
Formally, it's a state where there is something it is like to be. It's that subjective quality.
Like my experience right now. Thinking, feeling the chair, hearing your voice.
Precisely. There's a what it's likeness to being you right now. Contrast that with, say, a telephone.
Right. It functions, it processes signals maybe, but we don't think there's anything it feels like to be a telephone.
Exactly. So you are phenomenally conscious. The telephone in itself is phenomenally unconscious. Simple enough, right?
Okay, that part seems straightforward. But then there's this other term, meta-consciousness. What's that about, it sounds like? Consciousness about consciousness.
You've got it. Meta-consciousness, or you might hear conscious metacognition, self-reflection, self-awareness. It means you're explicitly aware that you're having a phenomenally conscious experience.
So it's not just having the feeling, but knowing you're having it.
Precisely. It's that step beyond just raw experience. It's the awareness of the experience.
Can we make that distinction more concrete? Maybe with an example.
Sure. Think about your breathing. Right now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm breathing.
Right. Now, a few moments ago, before I mentioned it, were you actively thinking, I am breathing now?
No, probably not. I mean, I was breathing, obviously. The feeling was there.
Exactly. The feeling was there. That's phenomenal consciousness. The sensations of air moving in and out were part of your experience, but you likely weren't meta-conscious of it. You weren't explicitly aware of the fact that you were experiencing breathing sensations.
Not until you pointed it out. Now I am.
Hello.
Now I'm beginning, oh yeah, breathing.
And that's meta-consciousness kicking in. You now have explicit knowledge of that specific experience. See how that works.
Wow, okay. That actually clears things up a lot. So phenomenal consciousness can just be there without me necessarily noticing it or thinking about it.
Precisely. And this immediately starts to solve our initial puzzle with analytic idealism. The idea that consciousness is fundamental doesn't mean every bit of it has to be under the spotlight of our self-awareness.
So the experience existed phenomenally conscious, but the explicit awareness, the meta-consciousness, wasn't active for that specific experience until my attention was drawn to it.
You've got it. That's the crucial difference.
And this links directly to being able to talk about an experience, right? Reportability.
Exactly. Metaconsciousness and reportability are very tightly linked. You generally need to be metaconscious of something to be able to report on it, either to yourself internally or out loud to someone else.
Because you have to know you're experiencing it to say, I am experiencing X.
Right. Think about maybe a very slight background noise. It might be part of your phenomenal experience, but if you're focused elsewhere, you're not meta-conscious of it, and you couldn't report on it until your attention shifts.
So experience can be happening, but our explicit awareness of it, that can be separate. They can be dissociated.
That's a great way to put it. Subjective experience phenomenal consciousness can be dissociated from the explicit awareness of that experience, meta-consciousness.
That implies there's potentially a lot more going on in our experience than we typically acknowledge or can even access through reflection.
It certainly suggests a richer, broader field of experience than just what we happen to be focusing on and thinking about at any given moment.
So metaconsciousness isn't like a whole different kind of consciousness running alongside the phenomenal kind.
No, not really. It's better understood as a subset of the contents of phenomenal consciousness.
Okay.
Think of phenomenal consciousness as the entire landscape of your subjective experience. Metaconsciousness is like the area illuminated by the spotlight of your attention, the part that becomes clear, reportable, and known to you as an experience you are having.
The stuff in
The
focus.
stuff in focus, exactly. The rest is still experienced, still part of that phenomenal landscape, just not currently being reflected upon or explicitly known.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned something about re-representation earlier. How does that concept fit in?
Ah, yes, that comes from work by Jonathan Schooler, among others. The idea is that for a phenomenal state to become metaconscious, it often needs to be, in a sense, re-represented internally.
Re-represented. Like the brain takes the initial signal and processes it again somehow.
Sort of, yes. Attention plays a big role. When you direct attention to, say, the feeling of your feet in your shoes.
Which I wasn't thinking about until now. Again.
Exactly. That feeling was phenomenally conscious, but bringing it into metaconsciousness involves attention selecting and representing that sensory information to your awareness, making it explicit.
And this re-representation, can it change the experience itself?
Schooler suggests it can, potentially creating a kind of feedback loop, maybe even amplifying the sensation or altering its quality slightly just by virtue of becoming aware of it.
Okay, this distinction between just having an experience and knowing you're having it
In
must have huge implications for neuroscience, right? Especially how they study consciousness.
Absolutely massive implications. Think about how much consciousness research, especially historically, relies on subjects telling researchers what they experience.
Right, verbal reports.
Yeah.
Or button presses indicating they saw something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what did we just establish about reporting?
You need metaconsciousness to report.
Precisely. So a lot of the research looking for the neurocorrelates of consciousness by using methods that depend on reporting, well, they might actually be finding the neurocorrelates of metaconsciousness.
Ah, so the brain activity they pinpoint might be related to the awareness of the experience and the ability to report it, not necessarily the raw experience itself.
That's a very real possibility. Some neuroscientific models even talk about information needing to be broadcast widely in the brain or requiring this sort of back and forth between different areas for consciousness to arise.
Okay.
And it's quite plausible that that kind of complex processing is more related to making an experience available for reflection and report, i.e. metaconsciousness, rather than the basic phenomenal feel itself.
So we need to be careful when reading neuroscience papers about awareness. They might be using the term in a way that equates to metaconsciousness.
We absolutely do. And it's not just an implicit issue. Some researchers, like Alex Clearmans, for example, are quite explicit about it.
What does he say?
Well, he's argued that awareness always seems to minimally entail the ability of knowing that one knows what is. That phrase, knowing that one knows, is basically the definition of metaconsciousness.
Right.
And the danger is leaping from the subject couldn't report it to therefore the subject wasn't phenomenally conscious of it at all.
That leap ignores the possibility of phenomenal consciousness existing without the meta-level awareness needed for a report.
Exactly. It conflates the two levels of consciousness.
And this isn't just a modern neuroscience issue, is it? You mentioned depth psychology earlier. Did figures like Freud or Jung grapple with this?
They did, though, using different terminology, of course. If you look at someone like Jung, his descriptions of what he calls consciousness often involve things like will, linking ideas together, self-awareness.
Which sounds a lot like metaconsciousness.
It aligns very closely, yes. So when Jung talks about the unconscious, he's often referring to parts of the psyche which is experiential, phenomenal, that lack these metaconscious qualities. They aren't being actively willed or reflected upon.
So his unconscious wasn't necessarily a non-experiential void either.
Not entirely. It was experiential content that wasn't integrated into that self-aware metaconscious part of the mind. Even Freud, with his idea of the unconscious holding repressed conscious content.
Right. Stuff that was once conscious.
He still conceived of that repressed content as being phenomenal in nature, just inaccessible to the conscious ego, the metaconscious part. So this distinction has historical roots, even if the terms were different.
Okay, this is really reshaping the picture. So let's bring it back to analytic idealism. Given this distinction between phenomenal and metaconsciousness, how should we understand the unconscious from that perspective? It's clearly not just nothingness.
Definitely not nothingness. Within analytic idealism, the unconscious isn't a realm devoid of experience. It primarily refers to two things.
Okay, what are they?
First, it includes all those parts of your own individual field of phenomenal consciousness that you aren't currently metaconscious of, like your breathing a few minutes ago or countless other sensations and background thoughts.
So stuff happening within me, experienced but not noticed.
Exactly. And second, analytic idealism posits a broader universal field of phenomenal consciousness. Our individual awareness is seen as a kind of dissociated segment of that larger field.
Like that, an island in a larger sea of consciousness.
That's a common metaphor, yes. So the unconscious can also refer to all the phenomenal content existing in that universal field from which our individual center of awareness, our island, is dissociated.
So it's either unnoticed parts of my consciousness or parts of a larger consciousness that I'm fundamentally cut off from or dissociated from. But in both cases, it's still phenomenal.
Precisely. It's always experiential in nature, just not accessible to my current meta-consciousness or individual viewpoint.
This really challenges our everyday ideas about being unconscious, like during sleep or under anesthesia. We tend to think of those as states of absolute blankness.
We do, but that assumption is worth questioning based on this framework. Take sleep. You wake up, maybe you don't remember any dreams, and you think, I was out cold, completely unconscious.
Yeah, that's the common feeling.
But all you know for sure is that you don't remember being conscious. Absence of memory doesn't automatically equal absence of experience during that time.
We forget most dreams anyway, right?
Exactly. And sometimes a forgotten dream pops back into your head later because of some random trigger or association. Plus, there's research, like Jennifer Windt's work.
What did she find?
Using EEG to monitor brain activity during sleep, even when people weren't showing the typical signs of dreaming, they often reported experiences upon being woken up.
Experiences. Not dreams, but...
Things like sleep thinking, sort of non-narrative thoughts, or sometimes even just states of minimal awareness, maybe selfless experiential states, even evidence of subliminal perception during sleep.
So consciousness might flicker or change form, but not necessarily switch off entirely, even in dreamless sleep.
That's what the evidence increasingly suggests. Phenomenal consciousness seems remarkably persistent, even if metaconsciousness and memory formation are significantly reduced or altered.
And you mentioned earlier that even during dreams, we often lack metaconsciousness.
That seems to be the case for most dreaming. You're in the dream, experiencing it vividly. That's phenomenal consciousness, but you usually don't know you're dreaming while it's happening.
Right. The realization, this is a dream, is pretty rare, a lucid dream.
Exactly. The meta-awareness usually only comes when you wake up and remember the dream, reflecting on it. So dreams themselves are another example of phenomenal consciousness, often occurring without accompanying meta-consciousness.
Okay, what about the really extreme case, general anesthesia? Surely that's a state of non-experience.
Well, again, the primary effect of many anesthetics is amnesia. They prevent the consolidation of new memories.
So like with sleep, the lack of recall afterwards doesn't definitively prove there was no experience during.
It doesn't prove it, no. It proves memory formation was blocked. And there have been studies suggesting some level of subliminal perception can still occur under anesthesia. Patients might not remember anything, but later tests might show some implicit processing happened.
And presumably metaconsciousness is severely impaired or absent under anesthesia.
Almost certainly, yes. And that lack of metaconsciousness would itself hinder memory formation, creating a bit of a loop. So again, the evidence for a complete absence of phenomenal consciousness is weaker than our intuitive assumption suggests.
So pulling all this together, the big takeaway seems to be that what we call unconscious is very rarely, perhaps never, a complete void of subjective experience.
That's the conclusion this line of reasoning leads to, yes. True, absolute phenomenal unconsciousness might be extremely rare or even non-existent.
Instead, unconsciousness is more like a catch-all term for various states of consciousness.
Exactly. States that lack metaconsciousness, states dissociated from our normal point of view, states where memory isn't functioning typically, states with altered content, but still, fundamentally, states where there is something it is like to be, however minimal or strange.
And understanding it this way actually resolves the initial conflict with analytic idealism we started with.
It does, because if the unconscious is just different configurations or inaccessible regions of phenomenal consciousness, then it doesn't contradict the idea that phenomenal consciousness is fundamental. It actually reinforces it by showing its pervasiveness.
So, to wrap up our deep dive, the term unconscious needs careful handling. Within analytic idealism, it's not a void, but rather points to phenomenal consciousness that's either not being self-reflected upon, lacking metaconsciousness, or is part of a larger field we're dissociated from.
Precisely. It's all still consciousness, just not necessarily our readily accessible reportable consciousness.
This offers a really different lens for thinking about our own minds, our sleep, maybe even attention itself.
It really does. It prompts a reevaluation of many assumptions.
So, maybe a final thought for our listeners to ponder. How does reframing the unconscious, not as an absence, but as simply different kinds of consciousness, change how you view your own daily experience? What moments of mindlessness or zoning out might actually be rich, phenomenal states lacking only that metacognitive spotlight?
That's a great question to sit with. It invites a deeper look into the constant stream of experience itself.
Indeed. Well, this has been incredibly insightful. Thanks for guiding us through these distinctions.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating topic.